Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to your Sunday show. Glad to have you guys here. This is October 13th, a Sunday. Thank you for tuning in. Listen, it's been an eventful week. Been a lot of stuff happening. Uh, in the war that's going on over in Israel right now, they're pushing deep into Lebanon right now. Uh, and of course, yesterday was a big holiday in Israel. And I heard that they were launching pretty massive attacks on Israel during their holiday. Uh, and I guess it caused quite a few injuries and quite a few blasts here and there. Uh, Now, Putin is backing Iran. And has Iran, I'm going to tell you, has Iran developed a nuclear weapon yet? This is a big question mark. It's not like they haven't had enough time and they haven't had the ingredients. They've been enriching uranium. I remember they were enriching it really fast back during the Obama administration. That's a long time ago, and they were saying back then that they might only be weeks away from creating a nuclear weapon. That was way back when they were enriching uranium. Now, weapons grade uranium, I think, is around 90% enrichment. And they were enriching it, they were enriching it up to like 60%, but it's not far to go to get it to 90%. There's been something that's happened, and nobody knows for sure at this point because they're not verifying it, and there's probably reasons why they're not verifying it. But Iran, there was an earthquake in Iran, and they don't know if or if not at this point it was a nuclear test. Nobody knows at this point, but it sure does look like it. That's why they're questioning this, and that's why there's a big question mark as to whether this was or wasn't. It says days after news broke of the earthquake in Iran's Semen province, speculation has continued on social media that the tremors were caused by Tehran's first nuclear test. On 10:45 on Saturday, the University of Tehran's Seismography Center announced that a 4.4 magnitude earthquake has shaken the city of Ardan in Iran's Semnan province, with tremors that were also felt in part of eastern Tehran. The epicenter of the earthquake, which occurred 12 kilometers below ground and was recorded at 35.42 degrees north and 52.78 degrees east. Uh, it's where and when and also the magnitude that is questionable, because when they do, like North Korea did an underground test, and I think it was like 4.7, and that's in that same range of 4 on the seismograph when they do a nuclear test, around a 4 or 5. That's how hard it shakes the earth underneath the ground, and they can hide a nuclear test by doing it underground, but they can't hide it from the seismographs. Now, was this an Iranian nuclear test? This is big, and it would affect the whole war scenario, because Israel was right on to come right in there and slam the Iranian oil fields and slam the Iranian nuclear program and bomb the hell out of everything. But with this, if this test is real, and they would know. I mean, we don't know. They're not telling us if this test is a real nuclear test or not. But if this was a real nuclear test, you would see Israel being careful about launching that attack. Well, that attack hasn't come yet. Why? Well, we're going to get into that. But one of the factors could be, if this is real, could that be a factor? That's a question. Um, because they would say to themselves, hey, you know what? What if we launch a big attack, and if they do have nuclear weapons in secret, uh, how would they try to stop that or whatever? Take a look at this. The United States is going to transfer the THAAD system to Israel right now, and they're doing it as fast as they can. What is the THAAD system? Well, you've all heard of the Patriot missile system, and it goes up and it intercepts. And you've all heard of the Iron Dome that Israel has. Well, basically, what they do is they're interceptor rockets. They've got a ability to shoot the rocket up, and the rocket chases the other rocket down, knocks it down out of the sky before it can explode. And so they're very specialized rockets. They're very sophisticated. Okay, we've got Hezbollah launching these rockets. They just basically they got a kitchen someplace, and they're cooking up rocket fuel. you know it doesn't cost very much, and they just basically fill a tube with the stuff. Basically that's what they're doing, and they point it in the direction of Israel. It costs about $150 of stuff like that they need to do the mixing, and stuff to create it, and the tube and everything. It doesn't cost very much. It costs hardly anything. But these other missiles and rockets that chase down other rockets have very sophisticated electronics in them. And so they don't cost $150. They cost more like 1.2 million or something like that. So you got a rocket that's only costs $300, and they're chasing it down with a $1.2 million rocket. Or I don't know, maybe it's not 1.2 million, but it's a lot more. That's my point. It costs a lot more for these chase down rockets. The rockets in these missile defense systems cost a tremendous amount more than the other rockets with no guidance system or anything. It's just point and shoot rockets are a lot cheaper. And so they're having to use up these rockets, and I don't know how they're keeping up with thousands of rockets coming into Israel, and these expensive rockets having to go up in the Iron Dome and stuff to try to chase down those other rockets that cost a lot. This must be costing an awful lot of money, and it must be awfully hard to keep those systems filled. But now they're going to transfer the THAAD system, which is even more sophisticated than the Patriot system. It's made to go after higher altitude, higher speed projectiles, more like what a ICBM type thing would be like. Not an ICBM, but say a mid-range missile that's capable of carrying a nuclear weapon. Well, this is your system to take it down, THAAD. And so they're rushing this over there. Why? I'm thinking to myself, hey, you know what? Maybe they're thinking if Iran does have something that's potentially extremely dangerous for Israel, maybe they're thinking, hey, maybe we can shoot it down with this THAAD system before it can hit Israel. That's what I'm thinking. And I think that's maybe why they're rushing it over. And maybe that's why they're waiting to get this. So before they launch their main attack, I'm thinking to myself, are they waiting to get this? Is this what they're waiting for? I'm just speculating on that. I don't know for sure. It says the United States is planning the immediate transfer of the THAAD system. See, they're not going to wait. You know how all these other things, like, okay, we're going to give F-16s to Ukraine. And a month goes by, 2 months goes by, 4 months goes by, 6 months goes by. Finally, they start trickling. The first one starts trickling in. And then they say, well, we need training and everything first and all this kind of stuff. And the mumbo jumbo goes on for ages. Takes ages. But it says the U.S. is planning an immediate transfer of the THAAD system, defense system to Israel. Maybe they can get it there in 2 days. I'm thinking to myself, hey, this is going to be a rush job. This isn't going to take 6 months. This isn't going to take 4 months. Not even going to take a month. I'm thinking they're going to get this thing there quick. That's what I'm thinking. It says the U.S. planning the immediate transfer of the THAAD system, defense system to Israel in response to increasing threats of ballistic missiles from Iran. I don't think that's really so much what they're worried about. Because, look, we just had, like, Iran launch, 200 ballistic missiles at Israel. And Israel's like, poof, that didn't do anything to us. So that's what they said, I don't know if it did anything to them or not. I think maybe it did. But it was like, poof. So why are they rushing this thing over there? If they already had a big volley of those missiles, those ballistic missiles, why are they rushing this thing over there? I think what they're worried about is a ballistic missile that maybe is carrying something else, packing something else in it. And they want to knock it down with this thing before it can explode. I think that's maybe what they're up to here. It says, the decision comes as regional tensions have escalated, particularly in Iran's recent retaliatory strike on Israel. It comes in spite of U.S. warnings urging Israel to avoid targeting critical Iranian infrastructure. Why are they telling them to avoid that? Is it because maybe they know something we don't know? I'm just saying that way back in the Obama administration, they were saying Iran's going to have a nuclear weapon soon. And now all of a sudden out in the desert, boom, underneath the ground someplace, there was a 4.4 earthquake. I'm thinking to myself, hey, you know what? I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'll let you in on it. Would it make sense if Iran's only got say they got one nuclear weapon to explode it off underneath the desert and create a seismic underground test? Then they wouldn't have any. Generally, what I typically tend to think is that a nation will get like maybe 4 or 6 of them or 8 of them or even 10 of them, all built. They're standing there, the shiny pointed things, and they're like, wow, admiring them and saying, okay, now we got to test one to see if they actually work good. That's what goes through my head. I mean, So anyway, the THAAD system is being transferred to Israel right now. That's what we know so far. But, things have been really heating up. And I haven't even talked about the things that's happening like in Poland and Russia. Poland's saying, hey, you know what? If you even put one foot on Lithuania, just try it. And we'll target everything that we can see, including St. Petersburg. Poland is like, you even touch one little tip. So, accidents can happen now. There's a war going on. Okay, I'll give you an example. I mean, this hasn't happened or anything, but let's just say Russia fires a missile at Ukraine and it accidentally goes over the corner of Polish territory and falls on a house or something. When you're near a war theater, stuff like that happens. It just happens. But when they're this hot on, the whole thing could just blow out of proportion. Like, boom! Like, because it's ready to go. It's what they call a powder keg. If you work with explosives long enough, if you work in a factory that makes firecrackers long enough, sooner or later you're going to have an accident. Because they're all ready to go off. All they need is a spark. And that's the way the situation is with this whole war thing around the world right now. It's all a tinderbox, and it's just waiting for a spark. And then the whole thing just... And it's not like they haven't got a lot of sparks going off, especially with Iran and Israel, going at it right now, and could Iran, really, seriously, guys, I mean, this is really a big story. Could Iran actually have a nuclear weapon right now? Could they have multiple ones? Could they? Question mark. Well, you know what I'm thinking. Of course, I always think the worst. But at any rate, it is a very dangerous time we're living in right now. Now, Elon, it's very important for all these nations out there right now to get the edge in space. For telecommunications networks, space is so much less vulnerable. Now, here's the thing. We've all heard of Elon Musk's satellite system that he has in place. You know, a Starlink satellite you can get, right? So people think to themselves, oh, the undersea cables are not that important now because we got the satellite system. We can get internet off the satellite. It's got to do, guys, with volume of traffic. The system that's up there right now, the Elon Musk's system of internet that's up there in space right now, can only handle it's only handling a very small volume of the traffic that goes. The massive voluminous amounts of traffic that go back and forth around the world right now are carried by these cables. And if you were to take the load that the cables are carrying, the undersea cables that carry the internet back and forth between nations, if you were to take that voluminous amount of communications right now at this point and try to offload all of that onto space-based telecommunications, I don't think it would function to do that because it's not big enough or widespread enough yet to handle all that voluminous traffic. And so I think we would be out of luck, and I think the Russians have been practicing at taking their subs down and cutting those cables. I think that they could probably do it pretty fast, overnight maybe. And it's impossible to protect them. And you just wake up some morning and the cables are cut. Well, what does that mean? That means that your internet's down. The problem with those cables wouldn't be restored until they're all fixed. Now, if they just cut a few cables, and they have this problem happen, out in the ocean there, every once in a while, a cable will malfunction or it'll get cut accidentally or whatever. Maybe a great white shark bites down on it or whatever, and it gets cut. They just reroute through a different cable, and you don't even hardly notice because they've got, I think, like hundreds of these cables. So they can reroute traffic. But there's obviously a certain percentage of these cables, if they're cut, that they can't reroute because it's too much traffic to reroute through the remaining cables that aren't cut. I don't know what that percentage would be. I'm just going to give a guess. I would say if they cut more than maybe 40% of the cables at once, that the whole thing would go dead because it wouldn't be able to reroute because the other cables that are left wouldn't be able to carry the volume of traffic. Then they'd say, well, how long is it going to take us to fix all those? In our modern society now, I mean, we built and structured this system back in the 70s and 80s and 60s and stuff when we were more organized. Now we can't get nothing done. We can't even get our potholes filled. We paved all these roads in the 1980s and 1990s and stuff. We put the fresh pavement down. Now we can't even fill the potholes on the roads we paved because we are becoming more and more unproductive all the time. Graft is rampant. I watched this thing. It was funny yesterday. I watched this thing. It was about. It was like a skit on YouTube of these people putting a highway in Africa, and so they announced it. They said, okay. It was just a skit. It was a comedy skit, but it was like they were there and they're announcing it. We're going to put in this big highway, and they got a big sign there and showing the picture of the finished highway going through Africa, and we've got 100 billion, whatever type of currency it was, of that particular African country or whatever. Maybe it was worth $100 million or whatever. He's got it in a suitcase. And this is what they announced. This is what we have to build this new major highway here. And they're all proud of it. Ribbon cutting ceremony and everything else. And the guy opens a suitcase with the money and we're going to build this. And then it's through the jungle and everything else, right? So then he goes back into the office with the suitcase and all of these. The prime minister reaches his hand into the suitcase and grabs a big lump of money and sticks it in his pocket, and then the next guy comes through and he grabs a big lump of money and sticks it in his pocket, and then the next guy, and as he's walking down the hallway with this suitcase of money, it's getting emptier and emptier, so by the time he gets down to his office and stuff, there's only like $200 left in the suitcase, so he has to build the highway himself because all the money was all stole. This is the way things are done now in the Western world. This is why we're unproductive, is because they can't afford to do anything because there's so much graft now in the system. There's so much malfeasance in the system, so much crookedness, so many politicians on the take, and everybody now is on the take. The construction workers, they just sit on their shovels. They tell them, okay, put all those cones down, Bill, you go out and put the cones down, and all you guys stand on your shovel and just stand there and look like you're doing something. And we got to make this job take a long time, because we're getting paid like $5 million and it's only really a day's work. That's just the kind of thing that's going on. That's just ad nauseum through the system. So yeah, how long would it take if they cut our undersea cables to get them put back in? It would be the same thing as saying, well, what if somebody blew up all of our highways, How long would it take us to repair and put the highways back in? I don't think we could even do it now. I mean, we did it back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, but we were different back then. We were able to work. Everybody wasn't on unemployment or whatever. Just the system is falling apart. The whole thing is starting to become unstructured or unsound and not glued together properly. We built it, but now it's in decay. So anyway, how long could you go without internet then if they cut the undersea cables? And oh my gosh, I'm telling you guys, the vulnerabilities in the system, what were those Chinese balloons they were flying over us? I got thinking about that the other night, the Chinese balloon that flew across America. I got thinking about that the other night. I said to myself, that would be, if you were to plant a bomb or something on the balloon, say a small thermonuclear device or whatever on the balloon, ready to drop. Just got thinking about this myself. Those balloons fly extremely high, like 90,000 feet. Okay, so you got your jet, and you're going to shoot the balloon down. You fly up there, I think the ceiling on those jets, when they get up around 40,000 feet, they're uncomfortably high in those jets. But then they go up another 10,000, 50,000. And they're starting to get to the point where their engines aren't working right. And I think the ceiling's like, 55 or 60,000. That's what's called the ceiling. So you're up about 55,000 feet. You're at your ceiling for the jet. F-16, I don't care what it is, a Raptor or F-33, whatever, F-35, whatever. You're at your ceiling, So the balloon's at 90,000 feet, 80 or 90,000 feet. So you're up 55, 65, 75, 85, it's like 30,000 feet above you. You know what it would look like at 30,000 feet above you? It would look like a tiny little speck. So how are you going to hit that thing? It's moving along 80, 90 miles an hour, maybe 100 miles an hour. 30,000 feet higher than your jet. You're going to have to use an air-to-air missile. Some sort of sidewinder or something. So it's going to have to fly from your jet, where you release it at, say, 55,000 feet. It's going to have to fly up to like 85, 90,000 feet to hit that thing. And it's a tiny target. Well, it's a balloon, but it's not that big of a target. But yeah, it could hit it. And I think that's how they brought that one down. I think it flew over the coast of Carolina, and they shot it down with that way. But now, picture if the balloon's carrying a thermonuclear weapon hanging below it. So, hard enough to hit the thing, you got to use some sort of a missile, air-to-air missile, and you got to go up to the flame-out area of your jet, and you got to shoot up from 30,000 feet up higher to get it. So, yeah, you hit it. You knock it out. Pam. Right? But tied by cables underneath it is the weapon. You've just popped the balloon, and the weapon starts to fall. Now, the weapon might not be very big, and it's falling really fast. What if there's a thing inside an altimeter or something inside the the weapon itself, and when it hits a certain altitude, it explodes. Well, then you haven't done anything. You've shot the balloon down, popped the balloon, but the weapon is still in play. How do you stop that? And you better get your jet out of there really fast. Let's just put it that way, because you've just now popped the balloon. You're 55,000 feet below the balloon. It's up 80 or 90, and that weapon's now falling down towards you. You better scurry the heck out of there before that thing goes off. It's an altitude to go off. So that would be it just seems to me that would be a very, very dangerous weapon system. A balloon. You wouldn't think it would be a dangerous weapon system, but it's because it's so high. And it's quiet. They can sneak in. Something like that could sneak in. I'm just saying, guys. I'm just thinking these things over and thinking about what they could do and what the potentiality is. What if, a country wanted to use those things? They could launch about 10 of them at the same time, and then it would be awful hard to stop all of them at once. I don't know how you'd stop them. Whew, what a world we live in. Crazy. But this is a great idea right here. The chopsticks, they call it. Now, here's Elon Musk's this new booster. And they were having problems with the thing coming down the land and toppling over and exploding. But now they got what's called the chopsticks. And the chopsticks grab it and hold it and keep it from toppling over. Great idea. It's simplistic. Very simple. 2 hydraulic arms close in and contact the rocket and keep it from toppling over. It was a simple idea, and I mean, probably whoever thought of that, and it's just sometimes the simplest ideas are the best ideas. But evidently this has been really successful now at catching this descending rocket booster. So now I guess they're on their way. And this is very important, because if a country can lead the space race and have a way of moving cargo from the ground up into space, that's big. That's huge. In the modern day, in the type of systems that we have now in the Earth, it's huge to be able to move cargo to space freely, And evidently that must be a reusable booster, I imagine. I think that's a great idea too, having reusable parts. So anyway, let's move on and take a look now at what the stock market's doing. Talked about enough about war and stuff. The Dow Jones is up on the week, up over 400 points on the week. It closed at 42,863. Boy, she's high. And the S&P 500 closed up 34 points, and it's at 5,815. We saw Bitcoin fall back just a little bit, but we're going to be talking about that in a minute here. We're going to take a look at the silver price. I'll give this a second here to close, this page to close. I noticed that ads recently, they're getting more and more aggressive, wanting to sell you stuff all the time, just right in your face. Everywhere you go on the internet, ads pop up. You pop that ad away, you want to watch your show or whatever, and another ad pops up before you can even pop up the last one. They're getting more and more aggressive all the time about making money. And so as people are getting broker and broker, they're getting more and more aggressive. So we got the silver price today at $31.51. It's up 39 cents. That's where it ended the week. We're getting very close to the election. And I only told you guys that silver and gold price were going to tread water up until the election. After the election's over, I think we're going to see some price changes here. But I wonder, who do you guys think's going to win this thing? I know who I think's going to win. And anyway, it's coming very soon. It's in November, from what I gather, and they're going to have when is actually in the swearing-in ceremony? When is exactly that? Is it in January? I can't remember now when the swearing in. Well, I mean, I'm up here in Canada, so I'm not completely up on what's happening in U.S. politics all the time, as far as the elections and stuff are concerned. But I do follow it, and I do have a person in mind who I think is going to win this thing. I'm not going to say. Anyway, taking a look today at cryptocurrency. We're taking a look at Bitcoin at 62,705. Ethereum is at 24.58, and XRP is at 53 cents. And taking a look at our bonds and rates and seeing what happened during the week here. We're looking at a 10-year at 4.09 and the US 30-year at 4.4. Listen, I was listening to an oil guy this morning. He's supposed to be an expert and everything else. And he was saying that the oil market cures itself. He says the price drops too low on oil, they'll produce more and the price will come back up again. And if the price goes too high on oil and there's a glut, they'll produce less. And he says it's a self-stabilizing mechanism. It can't go anywhere. And he says it has to stay under 100 and it has to stay like over 60. And if it goes above or below those two prices, it'll stabilize itself by itself. I don't think he realizes what would happen in a Middle East war. I don't think he realizes how unstable the oil price could become if there's a Middle East war and they start attacking the oil fields in the Middle East. What kind of a shortage that could create and what the price could actually go to. He can't see the price going over $100. I'll tell you what I can see. If there's a Middle East war and it's a bad one, and it becomes a regional war, and they start to do things like blow up the oil fields, which is what they're already talking about, and they start to embargo oil coming through those different straits, like the Strait of Hormuz, I think we could see oil price go over $200, and availability would come into question as well. So you'd be lucky to get it at 2.5 times the price it is now. So what is it running in the States? High $3, low $4, around $4. Can you imagine $11 gas? $11 a gallon gas? Or $12 a gallon? And imagine going to your station and they say, okay, we're out right now, we're out of gas. And then when you do go back and they have gas, there's a long line up to get it at those prices. That's what I think a Middle East war could do. The gas embargoes of the 1970s proved this is what can happen if oil starts to get cut off coming from the Middle East. See, the world has a set amount of oil it uses each day, and it's very precise. And if you start cutting that, the price shoots up if you start cutting into the amount of oil that's produced. And if you produce too much, the oil price really drops. And so it's very, very sensitive. Taking a look at our U.S. dollar index today is at 102.92 for the dollar, and it's going along sideways. I'll tell you, before I end the show this morning, there's been something else that I've kind of noticed. I'm kind of noticing these red lines developing. Like Russia's put a red line in there. They say they changed their nuclear doctrine, and now they say that if there's some sort of a large ballistic missile attack on Russia itself, like overwhelmingly sized large missile attack, suddenly this change to their nuclear doctrine is huge, and it creates a huge red line. And I noticed that when that red line was created, what was it, a week or two ago? That new red line of Russia's, I noticed that they haven't pushed over the red line. Now we're talking about a quasi red line developing here in the I call it quasi red line developing with this war between Iran and Israel, where Iran is saying, okay, we've just fired a volley of missiles into Israel. Now, if you strike us back hard, we're going to strike you hard, even harder. It's kind of like a quasi red line there. In other words, the red line is this could become a regional war if you decide to hit us back hard or whatever they say to the other guy. You know? And that's kind of like a quasi red line. It's kind of like sort of a red line. Sort of, but it really isn't, but sort of. And it seems like these countries are like, it's like on the other side of these red lines, it's the threat of possible nuclear war. And it's like what they're doing is it's like they're kind of fitting themselves in around these red lines to keep the battle going without it becoming an all-out nuclear war. They're kind of molding and shaping themselves on the battlefield, what they can and cannot do to the enemy without a nuclear attack happening. And they're kind of fitting this in. But the problem with all this is as they get closer and closer and the battles intensify and they remain conventional, you know, an accident, a black swan could trigger the nuclear war then at that point. You know, something that could come out of nowhere that just pushes over the red lines, but maybe it wasn't even meant to do that. When we get this close, we're walking on the edge. In other words, there's an old saying, you know, if you play with fire, you're going to get burned. That's the old saying, you know. And right now, as far as I'm concerned, we're playing with nuclear fire right now at this point. These countries are, the world itself is right now playing with nuclear fire. And this is another reason why it makes this such a dangerous time, you know, because one of the things is reaction speed too, because of this modern day of telecommunications being wireless and fast. Information can spread around the world in 5 minutes. And it's not like it was at one time. You know, at one time in battlefields had to communicate with passenger pigeons and stuff like that. And in the United States, you know, they used to carry letters across the country on what was called the Pony Express. Do you realize that was real horses? Most people nowadays, kids wouldn't even know what in the hell I'm talking about, Pony Express, you know. But those are real horses. They would take and ride the horse until he was just about exhausted, and then they would hand the letter bag off to the next guy who would ride his horse until he's exhausted. And this was their way of making it across country as fast as they could. Now our news now travels at 186,000 miles per second. What a different world than we are now than we were back just a couple hundred years ago. And so because information can travel that fast, so can the activation of weapon systems can happen just that fast. Because news travels that fast now. Anyway, thank you guys for listening to my show. You guys have a great afternoon and have a great week, and we'll see you again next Sunday. And thank you to my audience. Appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you later. Bye-bye.